Welcome to 75 Stories, a podcast created to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Normandale Lutheran Church in Edina, Minnesota.
Chuck Humphry, retired pastor. I was at Normandale for 17 years, I believe, as a visitation pastor, and also did many other things. Karen and I were members for most of that time. My biggest responsibility besides visitation was the Bible study class that I had. When I first came to Normandale, I was a little bit nervous because I had never been involved in a congregation the size of Normandale. I had never been a visitation pastor, although I certainly did plenty of visitation when I was in my active ministry. And I had never worked with such a large staff as Normandale had. That was in some ways exciting and in other ways a little bit concerning because I wondered how many bosses I would have. David Holm was the pastor when I first went to work at Normandale, and he was a wonderful pastor to work with, as was Dale Howard. They were very supportive, very helpful. And Normandale was a congregation that to me seemed extremely alive and healthy. One of the positive things about Normandale, I would have to say right away, was the fact that there were two visitation pastors, and I knew of no congregation that had that kind of a ministry going. So I was really honored to be a part of that. And I felt comfortable knocking on doors and greeting people that I'd never known before. But it was always interesting when I did knock on doors, when I would say who I was and who I represented, it was always to be welcomed. People were so happy to have someone from the church taking the time to actually visit with them, to hear their stories, to hear their concerns, and meeting so many people that had such interesting lives, and to hear their stories. I felt blessed and honored that they would share those stories with me. How I got into the Bible study was when David Holm left. I was asked if I would take over the Friday morning, early morning Bible class. That was the highlight of my week, always. It was my joy to share what I have learned about Scripture. And it must have shown in some way because people responded. People were there. People didn't want to miss the class. I didn't lecture to people. We would go through the materials, but people could ask questions. People could share their insights. And believe me, there were a lot of people in the classes who had insights into the Scripture that were exciting and helpful for everyone. It was just such a positive experience for me, and I know it was for many people because when I finally retired for the fourth time from Normandale, I had so many people who were sad that I wasn't going to be doing the Bible study anymore. But I would say as a visitation pastor that I saw such an array of people, and I got to know people. And I ended up having funerals for people that I got to know because I had been their pastor, because they would see me on a monthly basis and they weren't able to see others. And I have to just say that being a visitation pastor, I got as much or more out of every visit I made than the folks I was visiting, I'm quite sure. To be let into someone's life as a visitation pastor is very special. And special is a strange word, but I think people would understand that that's a special relationship.
We are so glad you joined us today here at 75 Stories. If you'd like to share your own story, please contact Christy Shepard at kshepard@normluth.org. Join us next week for another story. and share this podcast with your friends and family. We are all part of the Normandale community.